Welcome to episode 1 of NLC Coach's Corner. This week's episode is all about downhill running, how to improve your downhill running technique, and how to make sure that you get faster and more efficient on those downhills so that you aren't scared of going down those steep downhills, especially when it comes to trail and ultra races. My name is Lewis Moses, former Team GB international athlete, now turned coach and founder here at New Levels Coaching. So before we go into all the details, firstly, what we've got to look at is why is it so important to improve your downhill running? Well, since I've made a transition over into the trail and ultra world, what I've noticed is that people lose a lot of time on downhill sections when it comes to that downhill part of the course. And that's also true in road races as well. Particularly if you're on an undulating course or a hilly course, something such as Boston Marathon or New York Marathon, you could be costing yourself time by running downhill in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is you're not efficiently moving down the hill. Quite often, what we see is people braking down the hill. They put the brakes on. They don't let gravity take them down. And because of this, they're wasting energy. It's tiring and it has a massive effect on the quads as well. It starts to hurt those quads because when we're going downhill, we're loading our quads in an eccentric way. That does damage to the quads. And if you're braking as well, that's almost doing double the damage. So what we've got to look at here are the common mistakes that people make when they run downhill. And then what we've got to address is how we fix those so that we can help you to run faster and more efficiently when you're going down those hills. So problem number 1 comes down to that braking that I spoke about. What happens inevitably is people see a hill, they see this big downhill section and they think, oh no, I need to slow down. And what they do is they put the brakes on, they dig their feet in, they dig their heels back down, and they lose all momentum. That's going to slow them down. But as I've also mentioned, it's also going to potentially cause more damage because you're then using more of these muscles to really try and stabilize you when you could be getting that free gravity pulling you down the hill as opposed to you resisting that gravity. So how do we get down the hill more efficiently and effectively so that we don't damage the muscles as much and we don't lose that speed? Well, a lot of that comes down to being technically sound on the hill and practicing this. So my first tip to runners who are looking to improve their downhill technique and stop that braking is actually get more confident by going downhill. A couple of technical points here. If it's a really steep downhill, then yes, we have to think about shifting our weight backwards to prevent ourselves going downhill too fast. And we may need to use our heels to help us to get our way down, but we've got to have almost like a rolling motion down the hill. And that's a very complicated technique to teach. However, what we mustn't do is come to a complete stop because we lose our momentum and then we're not using that gravity to help us down the hill. So we can sit back on ourselves a little bit. We can drop our bum towards the ground. We can drop the knees so that the quads are getting a little bit lower and we're pulling ourselves down to ground. And we can just go down with those little steps and almost feel like you're cycling up and down with the knees. You're picking them up and putting them down to the ground. That's if it's a really steep hill. If the hill is actually quite a nice gradient and you're putting the brakes on, then that's something you need to change. So how do you change that? Well, what we've got to do is we've got to allow our momentum to go forward. We've got to change our center of mass. Our weight has got to shift over towards the front of our body so that you are taking that momentum with you down the hill. Now, what happens inevitably again is people become scared of that and they tense up. And I heard this on a podcast recently. It was a brilliant podcast with the Adidas T-Rex training group. Some of the girls who are training out over there for Western States in the United States. Western States is a big ultra marathon that's coming up very, very soon. And they were saying, you don't dance rigid, you don't dance stiff. I maybe do, but you don't dance in a rigid form if you want to dance well. And it's the same with downhill running. You've got to relax. You've got to relax the arms. That's why you see a lot of people with their arms down to the side, almost like floppy, even sometimes windmilling around like this. But you've got to relax from the shoulders, relax the arms, relax the hips. And if you do that, it gives you the ability to use these faster feet as you're going down the hill. Leg speed is important, because as you pick up speed, you need your legs to follow. So that faster turnover, what I call almost pitter-patter steps, pitter-patter, fast feet. And a good way to practice that, if you've got some ladders or cones at home, you can practice up and down faster feet and getting used to that movement because you're going to need those faster feet as you go down the hill. But you've also got to be able to react to the terrain in front of you. And that leads me on to point number 2. Point number 2 is all about sighting. You have got to sight the environment around you. What we see a lot of runners do, particularly on the trails, as they come to technical sections, is they start to look down at their feet like this. And anybody knows, just do it in a normal running motion, in a normal run. Go around on your run and look at your feet and look at what happens. As you run, you would never do that. And actually, it becomes harder if you look at your feet because you're not sighting in front of you, and you could trip over a curb or trip over something that's on the path. And it's the same when it comes to those trails, particularly in wooded areas that have got, the leaves that are all on the floor, or maybe the roots are coming through. You've got to sight what's in front of you and be looking ahead and scanning and sighting as you're going, because the mind will then process what is to come and the body will then react to that as you go. Again, this is skill. It takes practice. And you want to do this in a fresh state. If you're going to practice this technical skill and improve your technicity, then you need to do that in a fresh state. It's no good doing this when you're tired, because if you do it when you're tired, you're likely to make mistakes. So don't be afraid to go out, do a little bit of a warm-up, and just practice this running down hills in technical sections like the woods, and practice your sighting, practice your scanning. What are you looking for? You're looking for those things 10, 15 meters ahead. You're looking for the best path through there. Then you can take yourself around that path, as opposed to looking down and not being able to see what is in front of you. And that is a really key point. You need to be able to see what is coming to make a decision on what path you're going to take. And then you're going to apply the skills that we spoke about in step number 1 with things like your faster feet. You might see, there's a rooty section there. I need to be a little bit faster with my feet there. I need to be relaxed. My dancing hips, I need to move through that a bit more smoothly. Or it might be that you just see there's a camber on one side of the trail or on the road, and there's a flatter section on the other side, and you've noticed that's coming up in 10, 15, 20 meters. I need to stick to that side of the trail because that's a flatter route, so I need to take that. So step number 2 is all about sighting and scanning and making sure you're not just looking down at the ground, making sure you have a nice, clear vision. Yes, you may need to double check where you're going at certain times and look down, but just make sure you're looking down and up so that you're scanning your route as you go. Okay, and final step number 3 when it comes to downhill running. For me, it's about efficiency. This is a big mistake that I made when I first started running downhill. I have the ability to run downhill quite fast, and I had the confidence to run downhill quite fast. Once you've built up that confidence and you've practiced it and you've worked on those technical points that I mentioned, you might then have the ability to run faster downhill. This can be a problem. If you run fast downhill, that is also going to do a lot of damage to the legs. So it's about efficiency, it's about control, and it's about knowing your limits. So as you're going down the hills, you want to make sure that you're judging your effort as much as you are on the downhills as you are on the uphills. Because it might feel easy aerobically, because when we go down a hill, we're almost recovering aerobically, cardiovascularly. The heart rate might be dropping down because it's a lot easier, and gravity is pulling you down. You're getting that nice free energy to go down the hill, and you're almost recovering whilst you do that. But the muscular damage is huge. I spoke about that eccentric loading. That is going to come back to bite you later on in the race. And what we see, and I've experienced this firsthand, is that later on in the race, you end up getting cramps and things like the quads, the adductors, right on the inside there, even the hamstrings sometimes, even the calves, because they've been overworking as you've been going downhill, because you've been going too fast and the body can't tolerate the loads that you're putting through there. So how I like to describe it to the athletes that I work with is we're looking to be effective and efficient on the downhills. We're not looking to smash it, not unless it's coming right at the end of the race or it's part of your specific race plan. But particularly if you're doing longer ultras, something like 50K, 60K, 80K, 100K, if you're going to UTMB and doing the big 160K, then you need to bear in mind that this is a game of chess. You have to be able to control that speed and be efficient over the period of time that you're going to be out. And it's not a case of just smashing the downhills and taking full advantage of it, because that could come back to bite you in the backside, or in my case, in the quads. And that is very, very painful. So hopefully that helps you with your downhill running. And hopefully you can start to apply some of those techniques into your training. But remember, the top tips for improving those things that we spoke about at the start around body positioning, relaxation, fast feet, sighting and scanning, and also not getting carried away with speed, is all about practice. It's practice, practice, practice. It is skill acquisition. And if you're not confident with this, then start to practice it more often in your training so that you do become more confident and you do become more competent, because that is going to lead to faster times and more efficient performances on the downhills, which will hopefully improve your overall running performance when it comes to either trails, ultra, or hilly road races, or even something like cross country. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe, share it with anybody who you feel like would benefit from it, and I'll see you again very, very soon for another episode of NLC Coach's Corner.